back. I'm Dr. Cheek and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. And today we're going to talk a little bit about attachment theory and how attachment shows up in adult romantic relationships. Now, first I want to explain what is attachment theory, what is the purpose of it, and why people talk about it. Now, attachment theory, simply put, is the level of security felt in a relationship that is based off of early bonds that are formed between a child and their primary caregiver. Notice that I didn't say child and parent, because sometimes it may not be the parent that's the primary caregiver. It may be someone else that's the primary caregiver. Now, there are 4 distinct types of attachment. There is the securely attached. That's probably the gold standard of healthy relationships. Then there are the insecurely attached, which includes the avoidant, the anxious, and the disorganized. And I want to take a moment to address not necessarily a controversy, but a disagreement that may be in the psychological community as it relates to disorganized versus fearful and avoidant versus them being combined. Now, in order for me to explain this, I want to take it back a little bit to kind of explain the history. Now, the attachment theory was initially theorized in the 1960s. And in the 1970s, late 70s, 80s, they started to study it a little bit more. And the original theorists proposed 3 types of attachment, which were secure, resistant, and avoidant. However, in around the 1980s, a new set of scientists were doing a similar study and found that there is a 4th type that wasn't explained through anxious or avoidant behavior. It was the disorganized type. It was what looked like a disoriented or confused engagement with their caregiver in the stranger situation. Now, where the discrepancy comes in is whether it's disorganized, fearful, avoidant, or both. And it can be both. It just depends on which wheelhouse you want to be in. I believe the confusion came in based off of some studies that would sometimes assign fearful avoidant as a subcategory of avoidant. Now, when we assign it as a subcategory of avoidant, then that does not fully explain or is not truly correct of the behavioral presentation of disorganized attachment. Now, it's not a subcategory of avoidant. When we think about the types of attachment, there are 2 different wheelhouses. There is the organized wheelhouse, and organized simply means we're able to predict their behaviors. Like someone who's securely attached, or someone who has anxious attachment, or someone who has avoidant attachment. You can very clearly predict how they're going to behave in an adult relationship or in a romantic relationship. And then the second category, or the second wheelhouse, is disorganized. And disorganized is typically categorized by unpredictable behaviors. And this is where we have fearful avoidant or disorganized or disoriented attachment style, because their behavior sometimes is generally unpredictable when it comes to relationships. So this is why that confusion exists, because if we see it as a subcategory of avoidant, then it's not truly a representation of what disorganized or fearful avoidant attachment looks like, because it in and of itself is a different category and the behaviors tend to be unpredictable. So for the remainder of this video, I'm going to call it disorganized, but it's also known as fearful avoidant attachment style. Now, what a disorganized attachment might look like in relationships, it might be characterized by contradictory or confusing behavioral engagements. It may fluctuate between a desire to connect, a desire for closeness, a desire for intimacy, and a fear of being vulnerable or fear of maintaining that connection, and a fear of rejection. It may oscillate between those 2 fairly quickly and without warning. They tend to see their relationship partner as both a secure, safe base, but also at the same time, a source of distrust and danger or harm. So that's the conflict there. That's the conflicting and contradictory behavior. They see this person as someone they want to be close to, but also someone that can cause damage if they do get close to them. People who have a disorganized attachment style may be rigid and controlling towards their relationship partners. This is typically done to regulate their own insecurities. When I feel like I'm in control, when I feel like I can control my relationship partner, then I can have a better assessment over whether someone has the ability to hurt me or not, or does something that I deem not sufficient to remain in this relationship. So when I have control over them, I can determine how they behave sometimes. So they sometimes require that their relationship partners are subordinate or sometimes dependent on them in the relationship. Additionally, there may be suspicions or distrust of a relationship partner that may be unfounded, that may be based off of odd behavioral descriptions that don't truly substantiate distrust or actually lends itself well to someone being distrustful, but the person with disorganized attachment sees these behaviors as distrustful or suspicious, and they are constantly on the lookout for signs of rejection or disconnection or abandonment in that relationship. There may be this constant push and pull from the same relationship partner. No, it's not like a push and pull in the relationship. We get that a lot in relationship dynamics where there is one person who's trying to pull the person close while the other one is pushing it away. Characteristic of either avoidant or an anxious presentation, or just a natural progression of a relationship. However, in this particular dynamic with a disorganized or someone with a disorganized attachment style, they have a tendency to show that same push and pull within themselves. So one minute they may be ready to give full-heartedly to the relationship. They are totally in love, and in the next minute, disconnected, numb, not feeling any connection. So it's this constant hot or cold that you may feel from this person with seemingly no true cause, with no understanding of what's actually happening, and no communication of what happened. So what this might feel like for a relationship partner that's in relationship with someone who has a disorganized attachment style, that may look like constantly second guessing yourself or wondering what you've done wrong in the relationship to cause this disconnection, or to change how they view the relationship, to change their emotional connection to the relationship. It may look like you feeling like walking on eggshells constantly because you're not really sure what causes the disconnection in the relationship, and you're not really sure why your partner seemingly in one minute wants to be close to you and the next minute is actually actively pushing you away. Also, it may feel like a constant sense of confusion between that same push and pull dynamic, that same hot and cold dynamic from that relationship partner. So you constantly feel confused about your own security in the relationship, your own safety in the relationship, and what this might look like if you are the partner of someone who has a disorganized attachment style is like this desire to maintain this connection by holding on to the pulled aspects of this individual. So holding on to their bids for connection, holding on to the emotional intimacy that they allow you to have with them, holding on to the times when they are able to connect and feel that closeness, while at the same time feeling like you could correct the push behavior where they seemingly disconnect or distance themselves from you as a relationship partner. Even though that push behavior is not truly a reflection of anything you've done, it's not anything that you have any level of control over. That push dynamic, that desire to kind of disconnect, is something that's actually internal to that person. So therefore, thinking that you can correct for that behavior sometimes keeps you maintaining this relationship. Or if you've decided to end the relationship, there's this constant thought of, how could I have done this differently? How could I have presented something in a more effective way so they didn't disconnect? When in actuality, the disconnection is not something you have control over. So how do you make a relationship work with somebody who has a disorganized attachment style? Simply put, the person with a disorganized attachment style has to be aware of their own behaviors. And I say this because there is some research out there, there are some articles out there, there are some things that I've read recently that simply say you need to be understanding, you need to be patient, you need not to take this desire to disconnect or numbing, this cutting off as personal. However, in a relationship, if a person is not aware of these behaviors, it can cause damage not only to themselves, but their relationship partners. So without awareness, there is no level of understanding, of communication, of forgiveness, of patience that can help maintain this relationship in a healthy way. Can you maintain a relationship with someone with a disorganized attachment style while at the same time them not being aware of this attachment style within themselves? Yes. But that's going to lead to some discomfort and some unhealthy behavioral patterns on your part to maintain this relationship. So we don't want to get to a place where we try to maintain unhealthy relationship dynamics when a person is not willing to see their unhealthy relationship characteristics. Now, what I hope you take from this video today is that relationships or romantic relationships are not just built off attachment styles. There are many different interpersonal dynamics that go into how we present in romantic relationships or friendships or any other relationship for that matter. However, attachment style generally does show in multiple studies a connection between how those early bonds were formed with child and primary caregiver and how we connect with those we consider a romantic or a love partner as we age. And those attachment styles are put in two primary categories, and that is the organized and disorganized. And then the organized, that's those who are securely attached, those who are anxiously attached, and those who are avoidantly attached. And then we have the disorganized. And in that, we have the disorganized or the disoriented attachment style or the fearful avoidant attachment style. Fearful avoidant is not a subcategory of avoidant. It is in and of itself a disorganized attachment style because it's actually not predictable. Also, when we're in relationship with disorganized individuals, how they present in relationships can be confusing for themselves, can be confusing for the relationship partner, and their behaviors can contradict themselves by oscillating between a desire for connection and a fear of disconnection, a fear of rejection, a fear of actually being vulnerable in that relationship and not feeling safe. And you can maintain a relationship with someone who has a disorganized attachment, but in order for you to have a healthy relationship with this individual, that disorganized person needs to be aware of their own behaviors and attempt to correct for those behaviors, or be aware enough to say, when I feel like I'm disconnecting, let me start to challenge that. Or when I feel like there is some suspicion, let me actually address that and communicate that with my relationship partner so that I can have an understanding of where this behavior is coming from for me, and my relationship partner can have an understanding of why they may start to feel a distance from me and not take it personally. Because let's be clear, in any relationship, if someone starts to distance themselves, it does feel personal. And there is not a lot of ways to make that feel less personal, especially in a romantic relationship, because the connection is the relationship. So if we're disconnected, it feels personal. It feels like it's something that I have control over. And if you find that you're in a relationship with a person with a disorganized attachment style, start to notice that and start to see in yourself if you're trying to correct for behaviors that you have no control over. If you're trying to correct for distancing or disconnecting behaviors that you have absolutely no control over. Start to ask yourself, am I constantly second guessing how I'm engaging in this relationship? Does it feel like I am constantly doing something wrong, but no one's communicating what's being done wrong, but they simply pull away? If those things are happening, address the relationship concerns. And if it's not something that they're willing to address, it may not be a relationship that you're able to maintain. And that's what it feels like sometimes to date someone with a disorganized, or to be in a romantic relationship with someone who has a disorganized attachment style. Again, highlight, attachment style is not the only thing that's a predictor of how someone will behave in relationships. There are other factors that go into how we behave in relationships. Attachment style is simply one aspect of those dynamics. So, as always, I hope you take something from this video today that was helpful, that was informative, that gives you a better understanding of attachment theory and being in relationship with someone who has a disorganized attachment style. As always, please feel free to jot down any thoughts, questions, or comments you have below. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and I'll be seeing you again very soon. Thank you.